This is Democracy Watch. All right, Mark, there is a lot of talk about how much danger people like you and me might be facing in the event of a Trump term, especially one that's focused on consolidating power for the executive branch and seeking retribution against perceived enemies. And the first thing autocrats do, as we know, is to silence dissent in the media. How much of reality do you think that this would be in the event Trump wins in November?
Oh, I think it's something to take very, very seriously. I mean, the mistake people have made at every juncture with Donald Trump is to think that when he says something, he will be moderated by other people. There is no moderation that is going to take place in his vengeance tour. There is no moderation that is going to take place if he gains the Oval Office again and seeks retribution. He knows who his enemies are. He perceives that people in the media, that people who have been high-profile critics of his are a danger to his exercising authoritarian and, frankly, dictatorial power. And he is going to exact maximum pressure on them. Now, for some instances, that may be merely rhetorical, right? He may simply inspire his MAGA paramilitary, brigades to take retribution. Remember, in 2016, he said he would pay the legal bills of anyone who beat up people who were heckling him. Right, so that's at the most mild end of the spectrum. But at the more mainstream, such as it is, end, he's talked about weaponizing the Department of Justice. He's talked about weaponizing other agencies like the Internal Revenue Service. Right, and so I have every reason to believe that if Donald Trump comes to office, he will come with a long enemies list that will be his enemies, Steve Bannon's enemies, Kash Patel's enemies, Fox News's enemies, and he will empower going after them.
Does the fact that the Supreme Court has now given him carte blanche to commit criminal activity with impunity, does that change the calculus for him here? Does that embolden him further?
Of course it emboldens him further. I mean, why wouldn't it?
Right.
He's just been told by the Supreme Court he can assassinate his political opponents and not face criminal liability. He has been told by the Supreme Court he can stage a coup as president and not face.
So I guess the question here becomes, what could he do now to his perceived enemies, even those in the media, even those including us, that he might not have been able to do before this Supreme Court ruling was even handed down?
Sure. So let's start with the obvious. He can have you assassinated, Brian. I mean, I hope he doesn't. But he could have you assassinated, and he would be immune from criminal prosecution. Under the current ruling of the U.S. Supreme Court, if he said, I am having Brian Tyler Cohen assassinated because I believe that under my powers as commander-in-chief, I need to silence critics of my government because it's undermining my power as commander-in-chief, he would say that he's entitled to absolute immunity. If he said, look, I'm doing it under the Insurrection Act, a very broad statute that goes back, hundreds of years, he is entitled to near automatic immunity. So that's at the most extreme thing. But what if he just said to the IRS, go audit Brian Tyler Cohen?
Right.
He would also be subject. He would also, right? He'd say, "Look, that's my take care clause power. That's my power. That's my obligation as the leader of the executive branch, right?" And so, what would be the constraint on that, Brian? The impeachment power, right? You would need Republicans, even if Democrats control the House and the Senate, there would be enough Republicans in the Senate to once again block a conviction. So that would be your remedy.
Okay.
That would be what you would get out of this.
So I just basically have to pin my hopes on congressional Republicans, and I don't see how we can go wrong there. Mark, is there any perverted interpretation of his own powers that he might be able to rely on in order to actually try and get away with silencing dissent of his critics in the media?
Absolutely. Look, he would control the FTC, the FCC, the DOJ. Like everyone, is focused really just on like criminal prosecutions by the Department of Justice. If he controls the federal government, what power can't he exercise that the federal government can't influence in some form or fashion? That is before you get to other levers of power he would have. For example, Republican attorneys general, right, who would do his bidding, and again, the sort of quasi militia organizations.
And that's to say nothing of company CEOs who want proximity to power and who are going to be more deferential to him because he's the president. And at the end of the day, a lot of these companies are just focused on their bottom line, not necessarily standing up and defending democracy.
Or they're afraid of him. Right there,
Right.
he goes to the CEO of Google and says, "Kick Brian Tyler Cohen off YouTube, or else."
Yeah.
Well, Google's got a lot of business before the federal government. That or else, is DOJ investigations, FTC. I'm not saying that Google or YouTube would follow suit. I hope they wouldn't. I expect, they've been a pretty free speech company. But you could imagine the kind of pressure that the president of the United States could put on any manner of corporate America to make the lives of journalists, of individual citizens, of critics miserable.
Donald Trump has been pretty open about his desire to seek retribution against his enemies. There's aspects of this that will be helped by his Project 2025 agenda. What do you make of Trump trying to distance himself from Project 2025, which, of course, is the roadmap for an unprecedented right-wing takeover of the country that has been authored by Trump and his allies in preparation for a potential second Trump term?
Yeah, so Democracy Docket has covered Project 2025 a lot. And let me say this. It is a lie that Donald Trump is somehow distanced from Project 2025. Like, he may say that, in a rally, he may put out a press release, or his staff may put out a press release, but you look at who's staffing Project 2025. It is all Trump people. You look at how they describe Project 2025, and Donald Trump's name comes up all over the place. And you look at what Project 2025 is trying to do. It is to give Donald J. Trump, the authority to be a dictator, not for a day, not even for a week, but for a 4-year period of time, if he doesn't then try to extend it and hand power, for example, to his son or his daughter-in-law, right? This is hand in glove with his agenda. And the Supreme Court of the United States gave them a big boost, not just in the immunity case, but in a number of the other cases we saw late in this term.
Just to bolster your point here, while Trump is trying to distance himself, claiming that he doesn't know who's behind Project 2025, here's a small sampling of people who are involved in authoring or pushing forward Project 2025. Donald Trump's HUD Secretary, Ben Carson, Donald Trump's aide, John McEntee, Chief of Staff of the Trump White House Personnel Management, Paul Dans, White House Deputy Chief of Staff for Legislative Affairs, Rick Dearborn, his Director of the Office of Management and Budget, Russ Vought, Acting Defense Secretary, Christopher Miller, Deputy Secretary for the Department of Homeland Security, Ken Cuccinelli, Acting Director of the Bureau of Land Management, William Penley, Director of Policy Planning for the State Department, Kyron Skinner. I mean, the list goes on and on. These are people who, Peter Navarro, these are people who were directly involved in his administration. The fact that he can stand there and claim that he doesn't know who's behind Project 2025, when clearly he knows who's behind Project 2025, because more than 200 members of the Trump administration are behind Project 2025, goes to show that he recognizes the toxicity of this agenda, and he's just doing whatever he can to distance himself from it because he knows how dangerous it is, and he knows that Americans recognize how dangerous it is. And the ease with which he can lie about not knowing who's behind it betrays the fact that he will lie about anything Project 2025 related, because the writing is on the wall, and Americans, the more they know about it, the farther they run away from him as the result of that.
Yeah, look, he needs Project 2025 as much as Project 2025 needs him. I mean, Project 2025 is to try to make more efficient the evil things that Donald Trump wants to accomplish when he's president. It is to make it more efficient to penalize ordinary Americans, to take away women's reproductive health. Right? It is to ruin our economy. It is to make it more efficient on policy, but it is also to make it more efficient with respect to personnel and actions. It collapses the power of the executive branch into one man, into him. It creates a database of people who will disregard their oath of office to the Constitution of the United States and be loyal only to him and him alone, to remove any guardrails against him executing a ruthless plan of retribution and revenge against his political enemies. People are associated with Project 2025. They are not hiding what they are trying to do. They are bragging about it. Donald Trump is minimizing it because he figures he's got 4 months to get through before he can embrace it and he can execute it.
Yeah, perfectly put. We'll leave it there. Again, for those watching right now, to support the work that Marc and his team are doing, which has never been more important, please make sure to sign up for Democracy Docket. I'll put the link right here on the screen and also in the post description of this video. I'm Brian Tyler Cohen.
I'm Marc Elias.
This is Democracy Watch.